PTR Lazy Jacks are designed to contain the mainsail when reefing or dousing. At Port Townsend Rigging, we have developed the Lazy Jack kit for easy DIY installation. This video is a comprehensive step-by-step process of how to install the Lazy Jacks on your sailboat.
My name's Justin. I'm here at Port Townsend Rigging. I'm going to be doing the demonstration on how to install the PTR Smart Jacks on a boom. The mast end of it, the blocks that go on the mast, is already done on this boat, so we're just going to be looking at the boom section, which is kind of the trickiest bit.
In the kit, you will find 2 control lines, cheek blocks, hardware, and 3 separate bundles of Dyneema: long, medium, and short.
The first section we've got, this is a 3-line system. There are some booms which only get 2 lines, so this is a little bit more involved, but there are two lines in each set of 3 different lengths: a short one, a medium one, and a long one. And the first thing that we got to do is to lay out where these are going to attach on the boom. A little bit counterintuitive that the longer lines go at the aft end of the boom, so it's actually taller at the back end and gets shorter as it goes forward.
The first step will be to determine the mounting locations of the pad eyes that connect the Dyneema lines to the boom.
So on the sheet that comes with them, there will be a range of locations for each line. So we'll go ahead and just put a tape measure on the boom. It's not hypercritical exactly where it goes to. I'll measure it from the tack point, usually is the best place to start, and we'll just kind of fudge it once we get them laid out. But since I don't actually have the whole fitting on here, I'm just gonna guesstimate about where the tack will be, and I just lay the tape measure along, tape it on there just so I have a approximate measurement. The first line is going to be between 32 and 38 inches, so I'll just put a couple of pieces of tape on here to indicate the range, and these are, you know, fairly rough. It doesn't really, we'll get the fine tune done as we fit it. 68 to 72, the next range. 104 to 108, and 134 to 138. So that's approximately where these are going to go. And sometimes you'll land on an existing piece of hardware or something like that, and then you'll want to have the flexibility to be able to move away from that. But so then the next thing, once we've got those laid out, get the tape measure out of the way. Take these apart and extract one. On this set, there are 3 different lengths. There are 2 lines in each bundle, so they'll just be tied together like that. So this is the short ones. There's 2 of them. The shortest set of lines, the forward lines, have 2 soft eyes, which both attach to the boom. The other 2 lines have a soft eye on one end and a thimble on the other end. So one end attaches to the boom, and one end is floating with a line going through the thimble. It'll become a little bit more clear once we get it on there. We can stretch it out. So we'll start at the aft end with the long line, and we're going to attach the non-thimble in the soft eye end of this to the boom, and I'm just going to use a little piece of seine twine. This is an experimental method, but you can also use a piece of tape. We're just going to try to hold this end on in approximately the location of our measurement, and we'll just kind of play with that a little bit and see how it. This is just to be able to kind of play with where it wants to lay. So we start out with the longest line at the aft end of the boom and attached temporarily for that at the furthest aft point, with the soft eye at the boom and the thimble at the other end. And then the medium length line, the second line, we'll take this and take the soft eye end of that and pass it through the thimble of the long line. And then that end that just went through the thimble will now be attached to the boom at the next forward location. So I'm just going to tie that on there. And attaching these just allows us to kind of mock up how it's going to fit once it's stowed. That's the main trick with getting these things on here so that they work well, is that when they're in the stowed position, that they lie neatly along the boom and they're not bunching up, and that there's not a bunch of slack anywhere or anything like that. So the purpose of doing this layout is just to get that stowed position to work well. So then now we'll repeat the same order of operations again. With the medium length line, we'll take the thimble, and the short line doesn't have a thimble on either end. Take one, goes through the thimble, and we'll then get tied onto the boom at the next forward location. Okay, so now we have the short line through the thimble, and then the forwardmost part goes, the other end of the short line goes the furthest forward position. So, okay, so now we have all the pieces attached. The way that this ultimately will work will be going the other direction, but this is kind of the orientation when it's deployed, is you get the lines all like that, and they're, you know, grouped mainly in the middle section of the boom to support the sail where it's most likely to fall off. We pull this forward, and we kind of want these to all lay along the bottom of the boom, snug, and have each of these thimbles come up so that they're not running into each other. So you can pull all the lines and they're snug. And that seems like this is pretty good. If you want to get more fussy with it, you can try to make these like evenly spaced or whatever, but as long as they're not bumping into each other, it will be functional. And then the idea is that when you're stowing it on the mast, the easiest and simplest way to do it is that if this is the mast right here, there will be a tack hook on most booms, not all of them, but if you have a regular slab reef system with a tack hook, this stowage line will then come from here and go underneath that tack hook and then up the boom to the cheek block. And when it's stowed and out of the way, this is just pulled up along the boom and that's hooked under the tack hook. My just kind of initial, approximately in the middle of the suggested locations, has worked out just fine on this one. A lot of times you will need to kind of fudge it a little bit to make everything lay in here nicely like that, but this basically has worked out good the first round. But it is fairly flexible. It doesn't have to be a super exact location. Once we've got that established, the next thing that I'll do is I'll actually go and take these tapes that I've used to mark these, and I can just use one of them to indicate where I actually specifically want to put the pad eye. So, okay, there's where that was lying, so I'm gonna put that tape there. I'll get rid of the other one so I don't get confused. And we'll just repeat that process. And, you know, so this one, there probably is maybe a little bit of a conflict in that this piece of hardware, the pad eyes, goes inside the boom, and I don't want to hit that, so I'm going to cheat that back just a little bit to make sure that I'm not drilling into the stainless on the inside of the boom. Now I've got one piece of tape set for each pad eye, and I'll go ahead and pull this forward one more time just to confirm that everything's working. So that basically, this is about what we want, is to have these land within, you know, 3 to 6 inches of the forward end of the boom. And that will work out well for stowing that. So that's the end of the layout phase. Now we know everything's gonna go. The next step then is to actually drill and tap the pad eyes that go onto here. So at this point we can get rid of all the lines and set them aside for right now. All of that rigmarole was just to get those 4 pieces of tape in the correct locations. That seems like a big part of rigging is just drilling holes in the right spot, and the trick is to get them in the right place the first time. This boom doesn't have a whole lot on it, but if you have other stuff mounted on here, sometimes you gotta cheat it. It's okay to go outside of the suggested range if you need to get the clear space for it to land on the boom. But the reason for doing that test then is to make sure, you know, so if you have to move one a little ways to get out of some hardware so that you're in a clear spot, that may mean that you gotta fudge some of the other ones out of the way so that the lines still line up and lay cleanly at the front of the boom.
Drilling, tapping, and installing the pad eyes.
All right, so the next part then is to actually install these pad eyes. So there's in the kit a baggie with 4 little pad eyes and the fasteners to attach them. These are 1024 fasteners, so we'll need a number 25 drill bit and a 1024 tap in order to put those in. I almost always will install these pad eyes fore and aft. Different booms will, occasionally you'll have an issue where that won't work. It is possible also. You may prefer to put them athwart ships like that. Most of the time, if it's a curved boom like this, then you'll have to shape the pad eye a little bit. And you can, by taking like a crescent wrench on either end, you can bend the pad eye around so that it fits a little bit better around the curve. I usually just put them in this way, and they want to be mounted along the center line on the bottom of the boom. So this will go where the tape is. What I like to do for drilling and tapping so that I get the holes where I want is I'll take a fine point Sharpie and I'll make a little crosshatch. So now I have basically a target for my hole. And then I'm gonna start, I usually drill okay without doing a center punch. It does make it a little easier to start it if you center punch it. With a little bit of practice, you can do it without, but it's actually especially easy with this because that little center groove will help hold the bit in the right orientation. And what I'll do is start drilling a little bit, and then I'll look at the hole and I'll see my crosshatch, the center line, and my little pen, and I can see where the bottom of that hole is. I'll look at it and I'll see whether I've got it in the right spot. If I want to cheat it a little bit, then I can angle the drill bit a little bit, and just with a high speed and low pressure, I can just kind of walk that hole a little bit until I get it where I want it. Of course, in this instance, it's not really hypercritical, but that's kind of a good trick for when we're drilling the second hole, we are going to want to have it right where we want it. Okay, so we drill that through. I personally prefer to tap my holes with the tap chucked up in the drill. A lot of people are getting nervous about that. I think that it's less likely really to break the tap with it like that, because it's mostly when I've broken taps, it's from moving it side to side and not from the torsional force. So I find that it's easier, it's quicker to do it with this. It is actually, if you have a sharp tap, that helps a lot. I like using this cutting fluid. Really any kind of oil will help some, but that makes it, aluminum is quite sticky. And so the bit will cut a lot easier if you just lubricate that just a little bit. Set that in the hole, make sure that you're square. Run in and out. Put that in place. So there's two different ways then to figure out where this next hole gets drilled. You can either drill through the existing hardware as it is on there, or we can mark it and use my hash mark target method to get it in the same place. But I can just use this hole as the target. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm just starting it and just visually looking if I'm centered. I've cheated a little bit this way now, so I'll angle the drill bit. And you can just kind of walk it and then come back straight. Once you get it started all the way down to where it's starting to cut on the outside, then we're square. So what I'll usually do, I'll just do one fastener, I'll get my tap, and I'll tap that, and I will just leave that like now. The process is then the same for each of the next pad eyes.
This process is repeated until all 4 pad eyes are installed at each of the marked locations.
Tap magic just to make it a little bit easier. The tap in general will follow the hole that's drilled, but you do want to start with the tap. Also nice and square. Okay, so now we have all the holes drilled and tapped, and the next phase will be to take them all off again, and then we'll reinstall them with both sets of lines on the pad eyes. Okay, so for the final installation then, we're basically doing the same order of operations as we did for our layout. This time we're using both sets of lines. So we'll put them kind of in order. The short ones forward and the long ones aft. What I'll usually do, I always want to be, anytime we're putting a stainless fastener into aluminum, we want to coat the threads with Lanacoat, and we also want to coat the bottom surface of the pad eye where it's going to be touching the boom. So I'll start with one fastener and Lanacoat, and then I'll put the soft eye of the long line, put both of those onto the pad eye. After I've got them on there, then I'll put a little bit of Lanacoat onto the bottom of that. That'll help a fair amount with any kind of corrosion. The stainless and aluminum don't like each other very much, and basically creating a little battery if you put those together, and then Lanacoat is very effective at limiting that corrosion. So I got both fasteners Lanacoated and a little bit of Lanacoat on the face of that. Screw those down, pretty snug. And then if you get the right amount of Lanacoat on there, you have just a tiny bit of it around the outside. Take your rag and just wipe that up so that it doesn't get on the lines and sail cover and all of that. Okay, so then these lines will have one port line and one starboard line. We have to keep those separated. So we have the long line and the thimble on the long line with a middle length line going through it. It can be a little bit of a trick keeping track of which lines are where and which side of the boom they're going on, but so now the other side needs the same thing. Thimble, the soft eye through it, and now we have the soft eye on the aft side of the middle length lines. And I'll do the same process again. A little bit of Lanacoat on one side, and then both of these eyes. Okay. Both of these, keep them untangled. It's easy to get them crossed up as you're doing it. As long as they kind of stay in separate piles. And then we take the short line, put the short line through thimble. Short line through the thimble on either side. The other end of the short lines, the forward end of the short lines, is the last part. So then, yeah, we have one on that side, and then separately on that side, and so those will pull up and basically be on either side of the boom when they're stowed. So then when they're actually deployed, then they're coming out up around the boom, and they'll come forward and stow pretty cleanly along the bottom like that under a little bit of tension. But so as they get deployed, they come up and they're one thing when you're putting them out, and something else to consider if possible when you're initially laying them out, is the hardware like cleats and clutches and winches that are on the side of the boom. Sometimes it's kind of unavoidable that the lines as they're deploying and knot are going to want to snag on those things, but occasionally, especially with a reefing winch on the front end of the boom, I'll try to set that so that the lines don't, at least when they're deployed, that they're not going right over the top of where the winch is. So when they're actually deployed, you can see a little bit about like this, that the forwardmost line, which is the one that's usually the most problematic with having an interference with hardware on the side of the boom, kind of comes at an aft angle when it's deployed. So you can kind of see how that lays. And then, you know, if there is a winch there, when you're putting it away, often you'll have to kind of do a little hand adjustment to get it around the winch so that it's not causing a problem. But the more stuff that's on there, the more complicated it gets to get that laid out. Anyway, that's basically the process.
Thank you for watching, and good luck installing your PTR Lazy Jacks. If you have any other questions, please visit our website at porttownsendrigging.com. Happy sailing!